All right, it's now 7 p.m., so let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to this 18th ongoing episode in our second webinar series for federal employees and retirees. My name is Quinn Ackerman. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Parco, as well as one of our co-founders. It's great to see all these friendly faces on tonight, as well as a few new ones. So for those of you who are new, we are Parco. Parco stands for Pensioned Americans Retirement Company, and we're a financial planning and retirement planning company exclusively for Feds. So whether you're retired, you're near retirement, you're trying to strategize the middle of your career, or you're just starting out, that's what we're here to do, and that's what we're here to help with. So we know there's a lot of misinformation out there, conflicting advice about how to go about your federal benefits, as well as being able to find a trusted, verifiable, and source material. So that's what we're here to do. We're experts in everything related to you guys. Because of that, we can make really, really great recommendations specifically related to you. So in the instances where we can find you cheaper life insurance, or you need help with your investments and you'd like one of our fiduciaries to actively manage that for you, you could use a tax preparer and utilize some of our accounting resources. Soon we're going to be offering mortgage refi. Maybe you want to utilize some of our trust and will services. These are the things that we do. Because we understand you guys so well and you're our niche market that we exclusively focus on, this is the way that we're able to generate revenue and help you guys at the same time. You may have recently seen us featured in some of the below publications. We're really working on getting our name out there and building a brand. So if there's anyone that you think would benefit from a presentation like this, spread the word. One big thing that we really want to touch on tonight is that now all of our webinars will be available in our online webinar portal, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of this presentation. So a few ground rules before we get started. You're going to want to ask questions in the chat window. You'll see it at the bottom here. There's a little chat bubble where you can ask questions. If you've got something specifically pertaining to your situation that you'd like more detailed and in-depth analysis on, reach out to us. This is what we do all day, every day. So when you see that specific things that may be applying to you aren't coming up, that's your cue to reach out. We try to keep these presentations to under 30 minutes to keep them digestible. So there's absolutely no way we'll be able to cover every little thing. On top of that, you guys can expect to get a survey email afterwards. We love feedback, candid, good and bad. We're always looking to improve these presentations. So let us know what you think. It's also a great space for you to tell us things you'd like to see covered in the future. There's topics that other folks aren't doing, or more in-depth analysis you'd like on some specific things relating to Feds, let us know. A lot of our presentations this year have been based off of your guys' feedback. So without further ado, let's get started. Tonight's presentation is focusing exclusively on FEGLI and the mindset of how you can start thinking about how much life insurance you need, and when you can start to realize maybe how much life insurance is too much, and if you're one of the folks that fall into that boat. So to start, let's see, skipped one. There we go. So tonight's agenda. First, we're going to start off with what FEGLI exactly is. And we're going to talk about your different types of coverage options. And that's going to be differentiating the fundamental coverage that most of you guys have, and then some of the optional coverages that you can elect additionally. Then we're going to talk about what it looks like when you want to add or drop coverage. And we're going to end the evening with an option B case study. So to start, what exactly is FEGLI? Well, FEGLI stands for Federal Employees Group Life Insurance Program, and it's exactly that. It's a life insurance program exclusively for federal employees. So for all you full-time regular folks out there, you have access to Federal Employees Group Life Insurance. This applies to all federal agencies, all positions. The one caveat is that you're going to have to be a full-time regular employee to be eligible for these kinds of benefits. A really, really important component to know about FEGLI is that it's underwritten by MetLife. So just as your federal healthcare has different providers like Blue Cross Blue Shield, maybe Aetna, GEHA, your TSP is managed by BlackRock, another third party. FEGLI works the same way. So its underwriter is MetLife, and that's who provides these benefits to you. The reason it's so important to know that MetLife is the underwriter is because depending on the state that you live in, MetLife may not be required to inform your beneficiaries that they are due a pending benefit after you die. This is really big. MetLife makes millions of dollars every single year on unclaimed benefits. So for those of you with this life insurance and with beneficiaries who you'd like to make sure get to see this very coverage that you've been paying into, you'll want to let them know where to go to get it. You certainly don't have to tell them how much, but let them know that MetLife is where they're going to want to go. Okay, so let's first talk about your fundamental life insurance coverage through FEGLI. It's also known as your basic life. So your basic life insurance, when you signed up to be a full-time regular federal employee, you were automatically enrolled in basic life. Unless you specifically requested to drop this or to get out of this, you have it. Now, what is it? Your basic life is based upon this term known as your basic insurance amount. And that term, that BIA, is going to tell you how much coverage you have. So your BIA is going to be based on your base salary. This is not going to include overtime or anything like that, just your base salary, rounded up to the nearest $1,000. After it's been rounded, they're going to add an additional $2,000 on top of that. So if you've got $58,000 in coverage, they're going to, and some change, they'll round that up to 59. Then they'll tack on $2,000 on top of that. So you'd have $61,000 in coverage. That would be your BIA. Now, an important thing to know is that there's a BIA multiplier if you're under a certain age. So for those of you on tonight under age 35, your multiplier is 2. So you take that 61,000 and you'd multiply that by 2. And then every year after that, that multiplier decreases a little bit. And by the time you reach age 45, it's just 1. So whatever your BIA is after age 45, there's no sort of multiplier attached to that. And it stays that way for the rest of your life. An important thing to know about basic life is that the cost varies a little bit while you're working, and it varies depending on the agency that you work for. So if you work for the Postal Service, one of the unique benefits that you get is that your basic life is free while you're working. It doesn't cost you anything. For all other federal employees across all other federal agencies, you guys are paying 32.5 cents per $1,000 in coverage every month. So to take that number and make it more practical, let's say you've got $60,000 in basic life coverage while you're working, you're paying $19.50 a month for that. For those of you postal employees, you're not paying anything at all. Now, this cost that you see here may change when you enter retirement. It's certainly going to change for postal, and it can certainly change for other feds as well. So let's talk about that for a second. When you retire, you are going to have to make an election on your retirement paperwork for what you want to happen to your basic life coverage when you turn age 65. It can get a little confusing because it's like, okay, so I'm essentially making an election for when I turn 65. What if I retire sooner than that? Well, whenever you retire is when you're going to make this election. And as we'll see in a second, the age that you are and how far you are from 65 will determine the cost you may pay in that interim period. So you've got 3 options here. You can elect the 75% reduction, you can elect a 50% reduction, or you can elect no reduction at all. Again, these are going to be reduction elections you make on your retirement paperwork. Let's go through each of these one by one. Your first option, and this is the most commonly selected option, is to choose the 75% reduction. Here's what's going to happen. Let's say you retire before the age of 65. If you retire before the age of 65, your cost is going to stay what it was. It's going to stay 32.5 cents per $1,000 in coverage. If you're postal, you're going to start paying this. You never paid for it while you're working, but you will be paying for it now in retirement. Once you reach age 65, it's going to become free. You are never, ever going to pay for it again. What's going to happen to that coverage is it's going to reduce by 2% per month every month until it reaches 25% of what it was originally. So taking that same $60,000 example, when you retire, You'll keep paying that $19.50 a month, and you'll continue to do so until age 65. When you turn age 65, it becomes free. It's going to start reducing. And eventually, it's going to bottom out at $15,000 in coverage. You'll have that for free for the rest of your life. This is the most commonly selected option. It's free coverage, and it can be a really good deal. Now, let's say you make something around there. You've done the math in your head about what a 75% reduction looks like based on your salary, and you're saying to yourself, this isn't enough. I was hoping to keep more than this. Well, don't fret. You've got two more options. You can also select the 50% reduction option. Here's what's going to happen. Again, you're retiring before the age of 65. Again, for those of you retiring after the age of 65, the only difference is that the change that you've elected takes effect immediately. It's instant. And then for those of you before age 65, here's what happens. You make the election on your retirement paperwork. You choose the 50% reduction. Now that 32.5 cents per thousand, or free for postal, will become $1.35 per thousand. It's going to stay there until you turn age 65. That's what you're going to be paying per month until age 65. When you turn 65, now it's going to become 71 cents per thousand, and it will stay there forever. That's going to be your monthly cost. And here's what's going to happen. Your benefit, your basic life, is going to reduce by 1% per month, every single month, until it reaches half of what it was. So let's take that 60,000 practical example. You retire at age 57. It's going to cost you, and you elected the 50% reduction. It'll cost you $62.10 a month, every month. You'll turn 65. And after you turn 65, it's going to reduce by 1% per month, and it'll bottom out at $30,000. And as soon as you've turned 65, it's going to cost you $42.60 a month thereafter, forever. Now, let's say you look at this option and you're like, you know what, shoot, I was hoping to actually be able to keep the whole thing. I like my basic life. I like the coverage it provides me. What's it going to cost me to keep it? That's a great question. Your third option will allow you to do this. This is the no reduction option. When you retire, it's immediately going to change to $2 and a little over 45 cents per $1,000 in coverage a month. It's going to be that way every month until you turn age 65. When you turn age 65, it'll become $2.13 per $1,000 in coverage. And that's what it'll be forever. Now, there's no reduction with this one. So it's always going to stay $60,000. Before your age 65, that'll cost you roughly $147.30 a month. After age 65, it'll cost you $127.80 a month. Now, many of you may be asking which one's the best deal out of the three. On a dollar for dollar basis, it's obviously the one that becomes free because you get to have some portion of it for free forever. But that doesn't mean the other options are bad. What you really should be thinking about here is what your biggest priority is. So if you're looking for the most cost-effective way to have some coverage, then the 75% reduction option could make good sense for you. If you're looking to keep more of that basic life, then you can certainly pursue the 50% reduction or the no reduction options. Really, the key here is to identify exactly what your goal is and then backing into the best way to achieve it. And that's the kind of things that we help our clients with when we're going through an analysis of their federal benefits, whether they're retired or not, but particularly before they're retired, what kind of election is going to make the most sense for you based on your goals. So now that we've gotten your fundamental FEGLI coverage out of the way, let's talk about some optional coverages that you may have elected earlier in your career. Your first option is option A. This is also known as standard coverage. It is a flat $10,000. The cost of option A increases every 5 years. So depending on your age bracket, that will determine what your cost of option A is. Now, it's going to top out at $13 a month. You're never going to see it cost more than $13 a month. What you'll see, though, is that the age bracket only goes up to 64. Why is that? Well, because when you retire, and this actually happens when you turn age 65 or retirement, the later of the two, your option A automatically becomes free. It's going to reduce at 2% per month every month, and then it's going to level out at 75% of what it was. In this case, that'd be $2,500. It's very similar to the 75% reduction option with your basic life. The only difference here is that you don't have a choice with option A. This is what it's going to do. So paying into it, eventually, all it's going to be is $2,500. Now, again, it's never really that expensive. Tops out at $13 a month. When we've done the analysis on this life insurance coverage isn't really either here nor there in terms of the cost. Again, this one kind of comes down to what your priority is. If you really like the idea of $2,500 left behind to your heirs, a lot of people like to think of it sort of as burial expenses, and that provides you a lot of value, then keep it. If it bums you out that it's eventually going to be $2,500 and you've paid into it for all these years and you don't want to anymore, then drop it. This one doesn't really have any major red flags in terms of the cost. So major personal preference here. Now let's talk about your option B coverage. This is all often referred to as a salary multiplier. And this one tends to be a lot of coverage. Here's why. What option B does is it takes your base salary and it rounds it up to the nearest $1,000. It's then going to take that rounded base salary and multiply it by a multiple. It's either going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 multiples, depending on what you've elected. And that is your base or your option B coverage. So because it's a multiple of your salary, it tends to be a lot of coverage. Here's the thing to know about option B and its cost. It increases every 5 years like your option A does, particularly when you're younger. And keep in mind here, this monthly cost is per $1,000 in coverage. So if you had $100,000 in coverage, you would multiply this number that you see here by 100. If it was $200,000, you'd multiply the number you see here by 200. That's how this cost table works. The thing to note is that as you start getting closer and closer to retirement age, the cost of option B starts becoming a lot more expensive. And you'll notice in this red outline that we've got here, it actually starts to double every 5 years. Now you'll see there's a little break in between 64 and 65 where that cost doesn't quite double. It definitely tricks you a little bit. But then you'll see it basically doubles again, and it doubles again, and it basically doubles again, all the way up until age 80. Some folks really start to run into trouble because option B becomes prohibitively expensive the older you get. In fact, it becomes so expensive for most folks that they are forced to drop it before they've ever received a benefit for it. And it's a really big bummer. I mean, they've paid these premiums for such a long time. They're hoping to see a benefit for it. And then when it starts costing them hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every month, they can no longer afford it, particularly as they're living on a fixed income with their pension, maybe their supplement and or Social Security. So this is something to be wary of with option B. Now, that doesn't mean that option B is a bad deal 100% of the time. Option B can be really beneficial when you're young because it's offering you a lot of potential coverage. This can be a really, really great way to get comprehensive coverage on your family in your younger years. It definitely doesn't start off as expensive as it ends up becoming. The other thing to keep in mind with option B is that with all FEGLI, there are no underwriting requirements to it. As long as you sign up for it in one of the approved timeframes or after an approved event, it's automatic. You are guaranteed. So for those of you folks who maybe have lower health or are in a poor health status right now, who may not be able to pass a life insurance physical to obtain cheaper private insurance, option B may be your only option to get a lot of coverage. So that's an important thing to know before trying to replace option B on the private market. Finally, we're going to talk about option C. This is referred to as family coverage. So with this option, it's the only one where the coverage actually isn't on you. So it's not on you in the event that you pass away. It's actually on your family in the event that they pass away. You would be the one collecting the benefit on, unfortunately, the death of your family. So here's how it works. You get it in units. So you've either elected 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 units. And each unit equates to $5,000 in coverage on your spouse or $2,500 in coverage per child. So each kid here would have $2,500, and then you would multiply that by the number of units that you've elected. The cost of option C. This is really important, and this is supposed to say C here. Sorry about that. The cost of option C here is important. It is not based on the number of, it is not based off of, and this should also say monthly cost per unit. It's not based off of the number of people you have covered. It's just based off of the number of units that you have. So when you're taking these costs, which I promise these are actually accurate, when you're taking these costs, what you're going to do is you'd multiply the cost by the number of units that you have, not by $1,000 in coverage, not by the number of people you have covered, simply by the units. So let's take a look at that for a second. Let's say you've got an employee. They're 60 years old. They've elected 5 units of option C, and they only have a spouse. Well, that would mean they have $25,000 in coverage, and it would cost them $29.25 a month. Now let's say you've got another employee, same age, so we know they're in the same age bracket, and their costs are going to be the same. And they also have 5 units, so we really know the cost is going to be the same. However, they have a spouse and 3 kids. Well, for that same $29.25 a month, they get $62,500 in coverage. So option C becomes even more cost beneficial the bigger that your family is. Now, here's the thing that we like to point out about option C. We always make sure to check this with every client we talk to as we're going through their analysis of their federal benefits. And on every presentation we've ever had on FEGLI, we almost always find someone who falls into this boat. Oftentimes, there are people paying for option C coverage that they do not have. Well, when would this happen? If you are divorced and or you have any kids over the age of 22, in that scenario, there is no one who would be covered by your option C. So if you're paying for option C and all of your kids are over the age of 22 and you have no spouse, you are paying for coverage that you do not have. Now, let's say your kids are older than 22, but you still have a spouse. You're paying for coverage that you have. This is if neither of those are the case. And in fact, you are actually owed a reimbursement for those premiums. Legally, MetLife cannot charge you for coverage that will never pay out. Here's the thing though, they are not required to tell you when you've hit this milestone. So if all your kids have aged out of coverage, maybe you're divorced or maybe you were never married and it was just meant for your kids. Well, MetLife isn't going to call you and say, hey, just so you know, you don't have any insurable interest on your option C anymore, you should drop it. They'll happily collect those premiums for as long as you'll pay them. So this is an important thing to pay attention to. And we often help the clients that fall into this boat submit an option C reimbursement letter. We've successfully gotten premiums refunded in the past. It does take a bit of time though. It's not super lengthy. It can sit there for a while. So if you feel like you're in this boat, reach out to us and let's get this tackled sooner rather than later. So in conclusion with option C, be ready to make adjustments in the event that you get a divorce and or you have any children who have aged out of coverage. And then secondly, if you are only covering your spouse, consider your spouse's health to help determine the value of this coverage. If you have a spouse who's maybe 10, 15, 20 years younger than you, and it's extremely unlikely that they are going to pass away before you, maybe you don't need this option C coverage. Again, it can be somewhat subjective here because if it gives you more peace of mind to know that it's there anyway, then keep it. Another thing to know is how you can adjust your FEGLI coverage. So if you would like to add some of the FEGLI coverages we talked about this evening, you have a few opportunities to do so. You can do so during a FEGLI open season. These are not annual and they are infrequent. The last one I believe was in roughly 2016. We see them come about once a decade or so, but it's not exact. So they're kind of once in a blue moon. The second time you can add FEGLI coverage is after a qualifying life event. So if you get married, or you have kids, or you've adopted, these are the types of things that will allow you to add more FEGLI. The third is upon passing a physical. So if none of these things are happening to you, but you want to add some coverage, you can pass a physical to hopefully become eligible for it and enroll in it. The one caveat here is this wouldn't apply to option C, as that's coverage on your family. So this one here, number 3, only applies to A and B or basic life. Now, if you would like to reduce or get rid of your coverage, you are able to do so at any time. If you've decided there's some coverage you need to get rid of, reach out to us. This is the form, what it looks like to fill out. It's known as the FEGLI change form. We help folks fill this out all the time. You can also change your beneficiaries. So another thing we like to point out with our clients is, and double check, is that the people who are listed as their beneficiaries are indeed the folks they want to receive the benefit. This can change. Life happens, things change, and you may want to change your beneficiary. So if you've thought about this and you're like, oh shoot, someone's on here who shouldn't be, or someone needs to be on here who isn't, reach out to us. We'll help you fill out the designation of beneficiary form. Now let's end with a case study. And this one's going to refer to option B, that one that we know becomes really expensive the older you get. Let's take option B, Brian. We know he's 57. We know he's in good health. We know he's making a little over $59,000 a year. He works for USPS, and he's got 5 multiples of option B. When we plot out this cost and what coverage he's getting, here's kind of what that chart looks like. Oh, first, let's talk about the cost. We know that particularly when he starts reaching near 60 years old, that cost is going to get really expensive. And in fact, from the ages of 60 to 80, you end up paying 80% of what your total benefit is just in those monthly premiums. So if you add them all together, it equals 80% of your total benefit. And that's not including anything that you paid for earlier than that. So let's take a look at what this looks like on a graph. We know Brian's got $300,000 in coverage. Let's say he was unfortunately going to die at age 67. Means he would have been covered from 10 years from the age of 57 onwards. We're just going to compare his costs moving forwards. His average annual premium would be a little over $3,000 a year, and he'd pay $30,000 into it to get that $300,000 coverage. Not a horrible deal. Again, we're not accounting for everything he probably paid into before that. The older he gets, though, and the longer he makes it, those premiums really start to ratchet up. So in the 20 years from age 57 to 77, he'd actually pay $108,000 in premiums. By age 87, he's paid $294,000 in premiums. And by age 97, he's paid way, way, way more than what his coverage ever was. This is how the cost of option B really gets to you. It becomes so prohibitively expensive. So what we did here is we started graphing some private alternatives to option B. Now, all of these are going to vary depending on the state you live in, your gender, your age, your health status. We're just trying to give you something as a baseline to compare to, but just know these numbers are very much an estimate and are really going to vary. So if you're interested in what these are going to look like for you, reach out to us and we'll help you figure it out. But as you can see here, I mean, these premiums are so much lower. Granted, they're term, but if you're looking to get this term coverage, some cheaper comprehensive coverage for a period of time in retirement, there are some way, way, way more affordable private alternatives out there. So long as you can actually get underwritten. That's an important thing to remember here. So as you can see here, I mean, the difference is kind of speaks for itself. I don't even really need to say anything about it. Even if you wanted to guarantee something until you're age 95, you've got longevity in your family. If your health is decent, there are better ways for you to be able to achieve this goal and to be able to keep coverage instead of it becoming so expensive, you being forced to drop it anyway. And these types of analyses, these cost differences are things we graph out for our clients every single day. Once we've gotten their information and the characteristics that are going to affect how much things will cost for them, we're able to tell them exactly how much they're going to be able to save over the long term. Again, granted, we're always checking to make sure people could get approved. Just as a friendly reminder, you think you may be in a health status where you're not going to get approved for private alternatives, this FEGLI option B is probably one of your only options. And regardless, if you're looking for things in the private market, always make sure you like the price and you get approved and you're in the new plan before you drop the option B. We'd hate for someone to get out of it and not be able to get back into it if they need to. So in conclusion, life insurance is a really important decision. It depends on a lot of factors. You know, when we're helping people with things like option B alternatives and replacements, the first biggest question we ask is, do you even need this life insurance in the first place? A lot of folks, you know, as they get older, realize their life insurance needs have drastically decreased as their kids have grown, as they've paid off a lot of their debts. And so for some folks, you know, what we're helping them come to the conclusion to is, hey, do you need this at all, or would you rather just pocket those monthly premiums? And for those folks, we help them drop it. And then for those who still have needs for it, we make sure that the life insurance they currently have is the most cost effective and sensible way for them to achieve those goals. So there's a lot that plays into it. It's going to vary heavily on your individual situation. And that's what we're here to help you with. So here's our works cited from tonight's presentation. If anyone wants to view any of our sources, we're happy to send this out. And then in terms of some upcoming webinar topics, next week's is going to be on the G Fund's frozen interest and what this means. So for those of you that have recently been following the news with the Treasury, they've made an announcement that interest due to folks on the G Fund is currently not being paid out. We don't want to scare you guys too much. They've made the announcement that, you know, at some point you should be back paid for this. But there are implications to this, and we're going to talk about it. Then we're going to cover what it means to be a dual fed family. So some of the best practices for spouses who happen to both be federal employees. Then we're going to talk about the survivor benefit, whether it's overpriced and undervalued. Then we're going to get into mortgage refinance. Does it make sense? When should you consider it? And what are the types of things to be aware of as you go through that process? And then the last thing to note is that on the last Sunday of every month, we do a retirement paperwork workshop. So our colleague Daniel, he hosted at 6 p.m. on the last Sunday of the month, actually goes through the FERS application with people step by step. It's live. You can ask questions. He'll do it with you. It's really fun. So let us know if you want to sign up for that. And then the last thing to know is that our FERS webinar portal, and there's actually some CSRS videos in there as well, is live. So for those of you folks wanting to watch our presentations in your own time, watch something again, watch one that you missed, you can do so. On our website, you'll see a tab that says webinar login. It's at the very top. Click on it. Sign up. It's totally free. I think you just need an email and a password, or you can sign in with your Google, either one, but it's free. And then you have access to all of our videos to watch at any time. If you need to reach out to us, you can email us at info@goparco, call us at 833-467-2726, or visit us on our website, goparco.com. John and I are going to hang out in the Q&A section to answer some of your questions this evening. And for those of you folks that have had none, we're happy to have you on this evening, and we hope you have a great Wednesday.